I stood barefoot on the porch, suitcase flopped open like a wounded animal. Tessa's voice pierced the night. "You've overstayed your welcome, Carol." My own son, Jacob, just watched. No one knew the truth. The house they kicked me out of? I'd been secretly paying the mortgage for 5 years. I didn't need to fight back, not yet, because sometimes the best revenge is a receipt. You don't throw away the hand that held you. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Before everything changed, before the porch, the suitcase, the silence, I was just Mom, not Carol, not a burden. Just a mother who believed in showing up. I spent 40 years as a registered nurse, the kind of woman who knew the weight of another person's pain before they spoke. I was never flashy. I wore the same gold watch for 20 years and kept my hair in the same soft bun David used to kiss every morning. He was my husband of 38 years, and when cancer took him, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the only person who ever looked at me like I was the whole sky. After he passed, I kept the house going for a year. I watered the lawn, changed the filters, and made tea for one like it still meant something. But when the mortgage ballooned, and the house needed a new roof, I made a choice. I sold it. Every photo, every dent in the wall with a memory, I boxed it up and let it go. Why? Because my son Jacob needed help. He and Tessa had just had a baby, my first and only grandchild, Leo. The economy had hit Jacob hard, and he'd just been laid off from his construction job. Tessa had gone back to work, and they were drowning in expenses. He didn't ask me outright, but I could see it in his voice, in the way he always said, "We'll be fine, Mom," too quickly. So I offered. "I'll move in," I told them. "Sell the house, and I'll help however I can." At first, Tessa smiled, but it was tight, like someone trying to accept a gift they didn't want. She said, "We'd love to have you, Carol, just temporarily, right?" I said yes, but inside, I already knew what I was doing. Jacob and I went to the bank together. They applied for the mortgage, but the truth was, he didn't qualify on his own. So I co-signed, and when things got worse, I paid the mortgage outright from my own savings. Month after month. Quietly. Why quietly? Because mothers do that. We hold up the roof and hope no one notices the leaks we're patching from underneath. I never told them how much I'd put in. Not even when the thank yous stopped. Not even when Tessa began making decisions like the house belonged only to her. In those early days, it was sweet. I'd wake up early to get Leo dressed, sing to him while making eggs. I watched Jacob run his fingers through his hair with that familiar panic only new fathers have. And I thought, this is what it was all for. For a while, the house felt full, not just of people but of purpose. But then, slowly, that shifted. Tessa began to refer to the guest room as my office. She started putting locks on drawers and changing the Wi-Fi password without telling me. I brushed it off. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself she was tired, that it was stress, that it would pass. But the truth was, something had cracked beneath the surface, and I was the only one pretending not to notice. Still, I stayed quiet. Because I believed love was shown in what you withhold, not just what you give. I didn't want to rock their fragile marriage. I didn't want Jacob to feel pulled between two women. I thought, if I just stay helpful, stay small, I'll always have a place here. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. I gave everything to that house, to them. But one evening, I overheard something that changed the way I saw my place in their lives. It started small, like most betrayals do. At first, Tessa would make passing remarks, always coated in sugar. "Oh, Carol, you folded the towels the old-fashioned way again." Or, "Maybe next time, just text me before changing Leo's lunch schedule. We're trying to keep him on our rhythm." Our rhythm. I told myself I was imagining it. That maybe, after everything we'd all been through, I was just sensitive. Grief warps perception. Sometimes you reach for hurt when all you really want is acknowledgement, but it wasn't in my head. The tone changed in the house. Tessa began claiming space. Subtle, measured, permanent, she cleared out the hallway closet where I kept my sweaters. Then the kitchen pantry. My jars were suddenly labeled extra. She started meal prepping everything on Sundays and asked me to please not interfere. One afternoon, I went to grab my cardigan from the coat hook and found it balled up in a bag marked donate. Still, I stayed polite, quiet. I made tea, tended the garden, picked Leo up from daycare. Jacob was always at work, long hours, overtime, trying to claw back financial ground he never told Tessa he'd lost. Because here's what they both didn't know. I was the one keeping the house from slipping under. When Jacob's construction firm laid off half its crew, he had 3 months of severance. After that, nothing. They didn't qualify for a mortgage, not without a cosigner. So I stepped in, told the bank I was moving in, promised my pension as collateral. But after 6 months of missed payments, I made another choice. I started covering the mortgage. Myself. I moved my account so the automatic withdrawals wouldn't raise eyebrows. Every month, $1,273 left my account like clockwork. I did it not for credit, not for control, but because I believed in them, because I remembered what it was like to be young, scared, and one bad break away from losing everything. I believed foolishly that love would come back around. Instead, I began to disappear. Tessa took over Leo's bedtime. She scheduled playdates without telling me. Once, she even told her mother on speakerphone, "I feel like we have a third child here sometimes." I was standing right there, and Jacob, he drifted. When he got home, he barely looked up. He kissed Leo, nodded at Tessa, and went straight to the den. I wondered if he noticed the fridge always stayed full, if he remembered the check I wrote for Leo's preschool enrollment. But I didn't bring it up, because that's the thing about quiet sacrifices. They don't echo. They vanish. Then came the dinner that turned everything. Tessa had invited her co-workers for a casual Sunday meal. I cooked most of it, pot roast, scalloped potatoes, green beans with lemon zest. It was something David used to love. I thought maybe sharing it would mean something. During the meal, one of the guests asked, "So, Carol, do you just live here for now? Or—" Tessa jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, she's just helping out temporarily. We've been carrying things on our own for a while now." I blinked. Jacob didn't correct her. He just sipped his drink. No one saw my hands tremble. I dabbed my lips, stood, and carried the dishes to the sink. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from something deeper. Recognition. The kind that seeps in slow and cold, like water under a door. I wasn't part of this family. I was an inconvenience being tolerated. Later that night, when the guests had gone, I asked Jacob if we could talk. He looked exhausted, sunken. I asked him if he remembered the mortgage. He nodded vaguely. "Yeah, Tessa handles the bills now." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Do you know who's paying it?" He looked confused. "The joint account, right?" That joint account was in my name. The money was mine. And he didn't even know. Or maybe he didn't want to. I went upstairs and sat in the room that used to smell like lavender and baby lotion. Now it just smelled like dry paint and Tessa's new office supplies. I stared at the walls and thought about every dinner I'd made, every bill I'd paid, every time I swallowed a comment just to keep the peace. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a house I'd paid for and been erased from. But even the kindest woman can only be invisible for so long, until someone makes her feel like an intruder in her own sacrifice. Sometimes cruelty doesn't come in a storm. It comes in drafts, cold, creeping, and easy to ignore until you're already shivering. It began with the guest room closet. I came home one afternoon from picking Leo up. He'd made me a little painting at preschool, a swirl of red and yellow he insisted was a dragon. We laughed the whole ride home. But when I opened the door to my room, the air felt wrong. Boxes, Tessa's boxes, labeled tax files, seasonal decor, and office overflow. My sweaters were shoved to one side, hangers twisted. A few of my old scarves were on the floor, stepped on. I called out, "Tessa?" She popped in, phone still in hand, not bothering to end her conversation. "Oh, sorry," she said, covering the mic. "Didn't think you used that side of the closet." I did. For 27 months. I didn't say anything. I just picked up my scarves and folded them back into the dresser. That night, I placed Leo's dragon painting on the nightstand beside my bed. It smiled at me, even if no one else did. Then came the locks. Quiet ones, invisible until you tried to open something. The cleaning supply closet, locked. The hallway linen cabinet, locked. Even the back door had a new keypad entry that no one had told me about. Tessa claimed it was for Leo's safety. Jacob said nothing. He never said anything anymore. Our conversations had dwindled to surface-level updates. Long day. Tessa's tired. Leo's got a cough. He had become a ghost in his own house, moving through it, but not living in it. One morning, I came down early to prep breakfast like I always did. Toast, eggs, and fruit slices for Leo before his bus came. But the kitchen lights were off, the counters already clean, and on the fridge was a note. "Please don't cook in the mornings anymore. We're trying a no-clutter routine. Thanks. Tessa." I stood there holding eggs in one hand and Leo's favorite blue plate in the other. A routine. She was phasing me out, systematically, intentionally. And Jacob? He'd vanished behind a fog of guilt and convenience. A week later, I walked into what used to be Leo's nursery, the room I had painted soft sage with stencils of birds. It was being cleared out. Tessa was dragging furniture out into the hallway. "We're turning this into a yoga space," she said flatly, wiping sweat from her brow. "Leo's stuff is moving to the main room." I blinked. "What about his books? His rocking chair?" She gave a tight smile. "We're streamlining." Streamlining. She was cutting away every trace of me. Even the rocking chair I had nursed. Jacobin. Gone. That night, I heard them arguing behind closed doors. Tessa was louder than usual. She's always here. Always in our space. "She's helping. She does a lot," Jacob mumbled. "For you, maybe. Not for me. I can't breathe in my own house." It was like a gut punch. I was less than a tenant. I was an intruder. And then came the breaking point. The family dinner. Jacob's birthday was coming up, and I decided to cook one of his childhood favorites, chicken pot pie with buttered peas and that cinnamon rice pudding he used to sneak bites of from the fridge. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen. Leo sat on the counter, giggling. "Mimi, it smells so yummy." By 6 o'clock, the table was set, candles lit. I even brought out the good dishes I'd unpacked from storage. Tessa walked in, dressed up. "Oh," she said, glancing at the table. "You cooked?" I smiled. "For Jacob's birthday. I thought it'd be nice." She rolled her eyes. "We made reservations. At Cielo's. Just us three. I mentioned it in the group chat." There was no group chat. I looked at Jacob as he came. Down the stairs in a pressed shirt. He saw the food, the table, me, and still he said nothing. "I'll put it in the fridge," I whispered, hands already reaching for the dishes. "No," Tessa said, "just leave it. We're late." They left. I stood at that empty table, the candlelight flickering against the porcelain plates like a cruel spotlight. I sat down anyway, ate one small spoon of pudding, just to remember what love used to taste like. Later that night, I was in my room when I heard Tessa's voice again, this time clearer, sharper, colder. "She has to go. I mean it. I want my house back." Jacob didn't argue. He just sighed. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, while Tessa told someone on the phone, She'll be gone soon anyway. I didn't cry when I heard her say it. Not. At first, I sat there, still, the words echoing through the vent. She'll be gone soon anyway. Like I was a delivery package, a stain on the carpet, something to be scheduled out. The silence after that sentence rang louder than her voice. And still, Jacob said nothing. I stared at the lamp beside my bed, the one David and I bought from that thrift shop the summer after his second round of chemo. I remembered how we'd argued about whether it was beige or cream. He said beige. I said cream. We both laughed and bought it anyway. It was the last lamp we picked together. I reached for my journal, something I hadn't done in months, and opened to a blank page. Instead of writing, I found myself tracing the edges of the dragon painting Leo had made. The colors were smudged now. He'd used too much glue and glitter, but it was beautiful. Wild and free. Then something inside me cracked, and the tears came. Not loud, not theatrical, just a steady stream down my face, quiet and burning. The kind of tears you cry not just from pain, but from being forgotten. My mind drifted back to 5 years earlier, just after David's funeral. The house was too big, too quiet. I had a choice: sell it and downsize, or try to hold on until the grief made sense. Then Jacob called. "Mom, I didn't want to ask you this, but we're really struggling." He had just lost his job. Tessa's maternity leave had dried up. The bank denied their mortgage pre-approval. And they had a newborn, I told him without hesitation. "You'll move into that new house. I'll help however I can." Jacob cried. I remember that. He cried, and I felt proud to still be needed. I helped with the down payment. Then, quietly, I kept going. After 6 months of missed payments, I stepped in without asking. I remember standing at the bank counter, holding the deposit slip with shaking hands. Transferring nearly everything David and I had saved for retirement. Told the mortgage broker, "Don't put my name on the title, just add me as a co-signer, that's all." I didn't want to be a burden, I wanted to be a bridge, and now that bridge had become a doormat. Back in the present, I got up and walked. To my closet. I pulled out my file box, something I hadn't opened in nearly 2 years. Inside were the receipts, the statements, the payment logs, all meticulously recorded, every mortgage draft, every utility payment, even the contractor invoice from when I paid to have the leaking roof repaired while Jacob was still unemployed, all in my name. For the first time, I didn't look at those papers with pride. I looked at them with grief, because they told the story of a woman who had given everything and been erased anyway. The next morning, the hallway was quiet. Jacob was gone. Tessa sat at the kitchen table on her laptop. I said softly, "I'll be leaving by the weekend." She looked up. "Good. I think that's for the best." She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't ask why. She didn't even thank me, just like that. I was no longer useful, but I wasn't broken. Not anymore, because I had something stronger than bitterness. I had the truth. I packed my bags slowly, folded the little things that still had meaning. Leo's painting, my thrifted lamp, the quilt David and I bought on our last trip together. I also packed the folder, not to throw it at them, not to shame, but because truth deserves witnesses. And they were about to witness everything. I wrote a letter to David that night. I didn't even realize I was writing until I looked down and saw the ink smudging from tears I hadn't felt. I did everything right, David. I gave without keeping score. I stayed soft when they got sharp. But now I see it wasn't love keeping me quiet. It was fear, and I'm done being afraid. Then I folded the letter, placed it inside the folder, and zipped it into my suitcase. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you loved deeply? I'd really like to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes just sharing it is a kind of healing. As I folded the sweater I wore to Jacob's graduation, I knew what I had to do. They didn't know, But they were about to. I drove away from their house at dawn, the suitcase rattling beside me like a promise. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds, colors David always said held hope. I let the light fill my windshield as I headed to Denise's. Denise greeted me at the door in an old robe, her hair piled into a messy bun. She didn't ask why I'd come so early or what had happened. She just opened her arms, and I walked, right into the warmth I didn't know I'd missed. Her living room smelled of fresh coffee and lavender. A stack of novels sat on the ottoman, mysteries she lent me years ago. On the wall was a framed photo of us from college. Two carefree girls, sunburned from a road trip to the coast. "I'm home," I said quietly, dropping my bag. She nodded, handing me a mug. "Good, we've got work to do." Over black coffee and toast, Denise listened as I told her everything about the mortgage, the kitchen locks, the dinner reservations, Tessa's cold voice in the vents. I didn't pause to cry. I just spoke. The truth aloud for the first time in months. She put down her mug and fetched a legal pad. "We're going to call a lawyer today," she said, voice calm and certain. "And we're gathering every scrap of evidence you have." I opened my file box at her kitchen table. There they were, bank statements, wire transfer slips, canceled checks. Each paper felt heavy with the weight of my years of sacrifice, but somehow also light, like a burden lifted. Denise and I spent the morning cataloging each entry. We created a timeline. July 2019, co-signed mortgage, moved in officially. December 2019, March 2020, first 3 missed payments, Carol covers half. April 2020, present, full mortgage payments withdrawn from Carol's account. June 2021, roof. Repair invoice paid by Carol. March 2024, window replacement paid by Carol. With every line we wrote, I felt my backbone straighten. I hadn't been invisible, I'd been unseen, and now I'd shine a light on it. After lunch, Denise drove me to the lawyer's office. On the way, she reminded me of my worth, of how many lives I'd touched as a nurse, how many patients I'd held hands with in the darkest hours. She said, "This is just another form of care. You're caring for yourself now." The lawyer, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair, reviewed the documents and nodded. "This is clear," she said. "You have equitable interest. We'll file for mediation. Force them to acknowledge your contributions." I exhaled a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time since that night on the porch, I felt something like relief. That evening, Denise and I sat on her back porch, the cicadas humming. Leo's dragon painting hung on the fence, and I traced its glittery edge with my finger. I forgot what peace felt like, I admitted. Denise handed me a glass of iced tea. "You deserve it," she said. "You did everything right." I closed my eyes against the gathering dusk and let the wind carry away the tension in my shoulders. A small smile crept across my face, the first genuine one in weeks. That night, I slept in a bed that wasn't crowded with resentment or passive aggression. I slept in a soft room painted sea glass green with a quilt Denise made me after David died. And I woke up knowing that I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a silent witness to my own erasure. I had allies. I had proof. I had a plan. And most of all, I had myself. With every receipt I placed in that folder, I built my quiet armor. And I was ready to use it. I returned to the house exactly 1 week later. Not to stay, just to finish what they had started. Tessa didn't answer the door when I rang the bell. But I heard her footsteps pause behind it. Then, reluctantly, it opened. She leaned on the frame, arms crossed. "Didn't expect you," I smiled, calm. "I'm just here to pick up the rest of my things." She stepped aside without speaking. The house felt different, smaller, colder. It smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and unease. I walked up the stairs. I had paid to carpet. Past the family gallery wall where not one photo featured me. Into the guest room, where my bed had already been stripped bare. My side table gone. the dragon painting tucked behind a stack of binders like it was something to be hidden. I gathered what was left: my quilt, my books, a pair of earrings David gave me our last Christmas together. Everything else was either boxed or discarded. They had already erased me. I was just cleaning up the ghost. Before I left, I took one last walk through the house, into the kitchen where I had cooked over 200 meals, into the den where Jacob used to fall asleep on my shoulder during late-night feedings when Leo was an infant. I stopped by the dining table, the same one I had set for Jacob's birthday dinner, the dinner they never ate. From my bag, I pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to Jacob, a printed spreadsheet of every mortgage payment, a copy of the original bank agreement, the repair receipts, and the letter to David. I placed it gently on the center of the table. No post-it note, no final word, just the truth, waiting to be found. I walked out without a sound. The calls began 2 days later. First, a voicemail. "Mom, I didn't know. Tessa didn't know either. I swear. Please, can we talk?" I didn't respond. The next day, he called again. And then again, each message more desperate than the last. His voice cracking open, slowly realizing the scope of the truth. I thought the mortgage was automated from the joint account. I didn't realize it was still coming from you. "Why didn't you tell me?" I wanted to yell. "Because you never asked." But I didn't yell. I didn't even text back. Silence, I had learned, could echo louder than rage. By the fourth call, he was crying. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Tessa didn't call. She showed up. Denise and I were planting herbs in the backyard when the doorbell rang. Denise opened it. I stayed. Back, hands covered in soil." "Carol?" Tessa said, stepping onto the porch. She looked different. Not polished, not smug, just unsure. "I read your letter. All of it," she said. "I didn't know. About the payments. About any of it." I nodded. "No one ever asked." She looked down. "I thought you were just here out of guilt or loneliness." I gave a small laugh, dry and hollow. "Even if I was, does that make me disposable?" She didn't answer. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the fence, and looked out over the garden. "You don't need to apologize. Not for me, for Leo, maybe. He'll grow up remembering who held him every morning, who kept the lights on." She shifted her weight. "Jacob wants to talk. We both do." "I know," I said gently. "But now I talk on my terms." I told her we'd entered legal mediation, that I had a lawyer, that every payment I made was documented and eligible for equitable reimbursement or division upon sale of the property. She blinked. "Wait, you're selling the house?" "Unless you want to buy me out." "Cash," I said. Tessa's voice faltered. "We can't afford that." I nodded once. "Then we'll sell." She stood still for a long time. Then quietly, she turned and walked back to her car. Denise exhaled beside me. Well, that went better than I expected. The mediation was quicker than anyone predicted. With proof in hand, the decision was clear. I was legally entitled to half the house's equity, or its sale value, should they choose to sell. The mortgage had always been in my name. The receipts didn't lie. Jacob looked hollow in that conference room, like a boy who had just discovered his favorite toy was made of glass. "I didn't know how much you gave," he said softly. "I didn't want to know." "I know," I replied. "And that's exactly the problem. There was no shouting, no courtroom drama, just a long, slow unraveling of denial." Tessa didn't speak. She signed the papers with shaking hands, and just like that, the house was no longer theirs alone. It was a transaction now, just as they had treated me. Only this time, I got something. Back. When you give someone everything, they forget your worth, until you remind them who really built the ground they walk on. Jacob came to see me 2 days after the mediation. Alone this time. He parked in front of Denise's house, sat in the car for a long while, then finally climbed the porch steps like a man carrying stones in his chest. I opened the door before he could knock. "Mom." His voice cracked the moment. He said it. I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table where the scent of basil and tomato from Denise's garden still lingered. I waited, not to be cruel, but because I had nothing left to prove. The floor was his now. Whether he'd use it wisely was up to him. Jacob reached into his coat pocket and pulled out my letter. "I've read this 10 times, he said. "I didn't know how far back it all went, what you were doing, what we let happen." I didn't interrupt. Let him carry the weight. He cleared his throat. "I guess I kept thinking you were just helping out. That you wanted to. That maybe it gave you something to do." I smiled faintly. "You know, people always say that about women our age. That we just need something to do. As if our lives become hobbies." He looked down. Shame is a silent language. His eyes were fluent. Jacob took a breath. "Tessa and I, well, things aren't good. She says I shut down. I guess I did. I let her set the tone. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want to choose between you." I shook my head. "But you did, Jacob. You chose silence." He winced. "I thought I was protecting the family." "No," I said quietly. "You were protecting your comfort." He rubbed his hands together, fidgeting like he did as a boy when he was about to be scolded. "What happens now?" I folded my arms, not in anger, in resolve. "Now, you refinance the mortgage, remove my name completely, or sell the house. Either way, I take what's mine, and then we see where things stand." He nodded, slowly. "And us?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. His face was older, thinner, tired. But in his eyes was the boy who used to leave notes under my pillow that read, "Best mom ever," in crooked crayons. "I'll always be your mother," I said, "but I won't keep bleeding just to keep you warm." Jacob's lips trembled. "Can I still bring Leo by? He misses you." I smiled. "Leo's always welcome. So are you. But only if you come as a man who sees me." He wiped his eyes. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." I nodded. "Then start here. Finish this the right way." The house sold 2 months later. It didn't happen without drama. Tessa tried to stall. She hired a second appraiser, tried to claim the renovations she managed somehow outweighed my financial stake. But paper doesn't lie, and a judge doesn't care about throw pillows and backsplash tiles. The final payout landed in my account on a Wednesday. I checked it once, just to confirm the number. It was more than money. It was recognition. Closure. I took a deep breath and began a new chapter. The Chiu cottage was small, tucked along the coast about 40 miles from Denise's place. 2 bedrooms, 1 sunroom, a tiny porch with peeling paint and potential. The garden was wild, overgrown, and eager. I moved in on a cloudy afternoon with a single truck and 3 friends from my old book club. We laughed like schoolgirls while unpacking. No one asked what I'd been through. They just passed me boxes labeled Carol's Things, with hands full of love. By nightfall, I was barefoot in the garden, planting lavender next to tomato vines. I buried the dragon painting in a shadow box by the fence. A week later, Jacob and Leo visited. Leo came running toward me like no time had passed. "Mimi, do you still have the marshmallows here?" I laughed. "A whole cupboard full." Jacob stood behind him, holding a peace lily in a clay pot. "I brought something," he said, sheepish. I took it, surprised. "For the garden? For you?" Inside, we sat with Coco and watched Leo play with a toy sailboat in the kitchen sink. For a moment, all the pain felt far away, like a distant radio station muffled behind better music. Jacob watched him. then turned to me. I didn't lose just your help. I lost your trust, and I want it back. You'll have to earn it, I said. Not cruel, just real. He nodded. I will. We sat in comfortable silence as the wind rattled the windows. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone trying to belong to a family. I was the family. The center of it, on my terms. In the silence after he signed the papers, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. The day the house officially closed, I didn't cry. There were no dramatic speeches, no courtroom confessions, just a signature, a handshake, and a wire transfer. It was as impersonal as the betrayal had been personal, and still, it gave me closure. I stood outside my little coastal cottage that afternoon. Barefoot on the porch, David would have loved. The wind rolled in soft and salty from the water, carrying the scent of low tide and honeysuckle. A hummingbird hovered near the feeder I'd just hung. This was mine. I had bought it in my own name, in full, with no cosigner, no shared deed, no hidden sacrifices. No one could lock the pantry here. No one could rewrite my story or box up my value with old linens. It was quiet, yes, but it was sacred. Inside, the house slowly came to life with the artifacts of my history. Our wedding photo framed on the mantel, the thrift shop lamp glowing warmly in the corner, the worn quilt folded over the back of the rocking chair I'd brought from Jacob's house, my chair. One Saturday, I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. My old nursing pins, letters, from patients, thank you notes from families. I cried, not from sadness, but from remembering that I had always mattered, even when others forgot. A few weeks later, Jacob brought Leo for a weekend visit. Leo ran straight to the garden, asking about the dragon flower, a nickname he gave the bright red lilies blooming near the porch. He wore a too-big sun hat and carried a magnifying glass, convinced he'd find fairies in the thyme. Jacob stayed quiet at first, helping with the dishes, watching me. He was softer now, humbled. He didn't try to explain away the past. He just showed up and kept showing up. He fixed the fence without being asked, replaced the mailbox when the wind knocked it loose. Every gesture said, I remember now. He and I. Tessa separated shortly after the mediation. I never asked for details. I didn't need to. Some endings speak for themselves. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the apology that never came from her. But Denise said something that stuck with me. Closure doesn't always look like justice. Sometimes it's just not needing an answer anymore. So I let go. One evening, Jacob sat beside me on the porch as Leo napped inside. The sea was loud that day, crashing like a storm in the distance. He looked out over the horizon and said, I think I confused silence for peace. I didn't answer right away. I let the waves say what needed to be said. Finally, I turned to him. And I confused giving with being loved. We sat like that, two people sifting through old truths. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small photo, bent at the corners. It was me, holding him as a newborn. David had taken it. My eyes were tired, but happy, unmistakably proud. I found this when I was packing, Jacob said. Thought you should have it. I held the photo in, my palm. It felt warm despite the cool air. We didn't speak for a while. We didn't need to, because in that silence there was no guilt, no blame, just love. Older now, weathered, but still alive. Leo came to visit often. He loved the beach, the garden, the pancakes I made with vanilla and extra cinnamon. He'd run through the house barefoot, dragging his stuffed elephant and asking me to read just one more story before bed. I told him the truth in age-appropriate doses. That families sometimes forget how to be kind. That grown-ups can learn and try again. That Mimi was never leaving again. Not from her house. Denise helped me turn the sunroom into an art nook. Leo's dragon painting hangs there now, properly. Framed, Below it is a quote I had stenciled in gold. "You don't throw away the hand that held you." I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I will never again shrink myself into someone else's comfort. I will never again barter my boundaries for borrowed love. I have learned that the strongest women aren't the ones who shout. They're the ones who stand, quietly, steadily, and don't move when the world tries to push them off their own porch. I didn't lose a home. I reclaimed a life. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have spoken up or stayed silent? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Your stories matter. Share them in the comments below. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the bar and walked away holding my own hand. Sometimes life doesn't come full circle. Sometimes it draws a brand new one and invites you to step inside it with both feet, wiser and a little more whole. I sit here now, in the sunroom of my little coastal cottage, the windows open just enough to let in the breeze and the quiet hum of bees over the lavender. Leo's laughter echoes from the yard as he chases butterflies, and for a moment the world feels simple again, not perfect, but mine. When I look back, I don't regret helping my son. I don't regret co-signing that mortgage. I don't regret rocking Leo to sleep while the rest of the house stayed dark. What I do regret is staying silent for so long. I used to think dignity meant enduring, swallowing hurt, shrinking myself, making room where none was offered. I thought love meant never keeping score. But there's a difference between grace and erasure, between support and surrender. Women like me, we were raised to believe that kindness meant invisibility, that if we just stayed good, stayed useful, stayed quiet, everything would be okay. But silence isn't peace, and self-sacrifice without respect is just slow self-erasure. To every woman watching this, especially those of us in the later chapters of our lives, I want you to hear me now. You do not have to disappear to be loved. You do not have to live in the margins of your own story. You have earned your voice, your name on the deed, your place at the table. And if they won't make room for you, you build a table of your own. I learned that boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks you hold the key to. I learned that love isn't proved by endurance, but by reciprocity. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave. Not in bitterness, but in clarity. And you know what? The silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was sacred. It gave me space to hear myself again, to remember who I was before life asked me to carry everyone else's weight. Now, I wake up to the smell of ocean air, toast with real butter, and the laughter of a little boy who still calls me Mimi, like it's the most important name in the world. And maybe it is. Jacob visits often. He's learning. We're both learning. We still have work to do, but we do it with open eyes now. No more pretending, no more roles, just real people trying again. And Tessa? I haven't seen her since the day she walked away from the porch. I wish her well. Not because I forget, but because I forgive. Not for her. For me. Because carrying anger is just another way to stay tied to people who've already let you go. Now, I carry lavender, and lemon balm, and the scent of cinnamon pancakes on Sunday mornings. Now, I carry peace. Before I go, I want to leave you with this. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in the life you built, if someone once looked at your sacrifices and called them expected, if your silence has ever been mistaken for weakness, then please, from one woman to another, stand up. Speak out. Step away if you must. But never, never forget your worth. You are not background. You are not just anything. You are the foundation they built on. And without you, none of it would stand. So claim your space. Hold your name. And don't be afraid to start again. Sometimes starting over isn't the end. It's the moment you finally come home. They may have thrown me out of a house, but I walked into a life that's finally mine.